DC, what's up? It's me, yours truly. I am back to post a quick video here. This is going to be one of my favorite videos to do each year, and this is put up by Beth, Miss 80s Movies and Music. She's doing the soundtrack tag again, which is, like I said, just one of my absolute favorites to do. You know, number one, I tend to connect a lot with Beth on the soundtrack side, because when it comes to like the 80s and 80s movies and 80s soundtracks and stuff like that, it's like she's my sister from another mother. Like, we just so get each other on that stuff. So it's always exciting to get her tag when it comes up, and I'm definitely excited to do a response. So let me just kind of jump right on board and go through the 20 questions. Question number one, how many soundtracks do you own? Just talking vinyl, not putting cassettes or CDs into play. I have 127 soundtracks on vinyl. First soundtrack you ever bought? I had to think about that one for a second, but I believe it was Saturday Night Fever. I think was the first soundtrack I ever purchased. Not this copy, of course, but I believe that was the first soundtrack I ever picked up, which might have been for a lot of people, actually, because we all know how huge that was. Question number three, most recent soundtrack purchase you added to your collection. And I got this probably about a month and a half ago when I was out in California. A Thin Line Between Love and Hate, a Martin Lawrence movie, good mixture between hip hop, R&B, just, you know, kind of just definitely some decent stuff. A soundtrack I certainly like. My favorite track on here is probably Best Beware My Crew by LBC Crew, probably my favorite track, but yeah, good stuff there. So that was my last pickup. Question number four, what's your most listened to soundtrack? Another very good question there. I'm probably gonna have to go with Grease 2. I definitely think I probably listened to this soundtrack more than any other. I mean, arguably my favorite 80s movie. I definitely love this a heck of a lot more than the first Grease. It's just, I mean, first Grease is legendary and awesome, don't get me wrong, but this right here just takes the cake for me. So that's definitely gonna be my most listened to soundtrack. Question number five, best opening song to a soundtrack. That was extremely hard. I actually had five that I picked out, narrowed it down to, and just, you know, figured out which one I was going to pick from that. And since I hadn't shown this one in a while, I decided to go with this. And this is a Tootsie. You guys remember this movie from, I think, 1982, I believe, and with Dustin Hoffman. And the opening track is "It Might Be You," performed by Stephen Bishop. One of my absolute, not one of, my absolute favorite song by him. Just such a beautiful melody. They say this was the early 80s, so it still had that amazing soft rock kind of delivery that Stephen Bishop could do. The lyrics were moving, just a very sweet kind of emotional feel to it. Just a absolute fantastic song. And so great opening soundtrack to this. If there wasn't another decent song on the entire album, it would still totally be worth it just to have that track by Stephen Bishop. Fantastic stuff. So I'm gonna go with that as the best opening song. Number six, favorite soundtrack or score composer and your favorite composition by them. I don't necessarily know if I really have a absolute favorite composer. I mean, my first knee-jerk reaction would be Polydorus from, like, you know, Conan the Barbarian and so forth, and actually that'd probably be my favorite piece by them. But I'm gonna go with something a little bit different, because this actually is one of my favorite soundtracks, song for song from front to back, and it's the Mistress America soundtrack. And the music on here was composed by Wareham and Phillips, were the two that kind of did it, and just a really cool soundtrack, especially for those that are 80s lovers. Because what you have here is a movie that came out in the mid 2000 teens, I think, like 2015. But almost all the songs on here, all the songs by them on here are just all instrumental. But it's like this, it's the type of stuff that you would hear in the background of a movie like 16 Candles, when the two teens are getting ready to kiss for the first time. And like this type of, like, you know, soft romantic type of 80s floaty music. And that's what they did on the soundtrack, and it is absolutely fantastic. So I'm gonna go with that pick for that question this time. And I don't know if they've done any other albums. I actually need to pay attention and look, because like, as much as I love this, they might have some other great stuff out there that I haven't stumbled across. So question number 7, a movie that had a lackluster soundtrack. Now I don't have any soundtracks in my collection I don't actually like. So what I'm doing here is between how great the movie was and how great the soundtrack was, this is the one in my collection I feel that has the most distance between those two, even though they're both, very good. So under that judgment system, if you will, I'm going with Beetlejuice. Just such an innovative, amazing, awesome movie, but I definitely think the soundtrack didn't live up to how great the movie was. Again, still a number of good things on here, but yeah, it wasn't as good as the movie, in my opinion. So that's Beetlejuice. Question number 8. A soundtrack that was way better than the movie. So again, I'm talking about the exact same thing, just kind of in reverse. Soundtrack is good, movie is good, there was just the greatest distance between them. And this is just a single from the soundtrack, but I'm going with this, like with the soundtrack from Ghostbusters 2. Or maybe even Ghostbusters itself. Ghostbusters, legendary movie. I mean, one of the biggest franchises from the 80s, and I mean, it was what it was. It was Ghostbusters. I mean, but when it comes to all of the 80s movies and everything that, kind of were big, that was just one that was kind of the lowest on one of the lows on my list. I just never got fanatical about it, if you will, as I am about so many other 80s movies. So when you had the soundtrack with stuff like On Our Own by Bobby Brown and a number of other things, which I think was like one of Bobby Brown's best songs, and a couple other things, I mean, I think that's definitely one where the movie just wasn't as good as the soundtrack to me. Still good, so don't get me wrong. I mean, again, Ghostbusters is legendary, but that's what I'm going to pick for my answer there. Question number 9, favorite artwork or jacket or colored vinyl. And I'm going to go with, I kind of cheated on this one, but I think it all falls along the same theme, so I'm going to kind of include it as one answer there. But I'm going with, oh sorry, I got the glare and I couldn't see. But anyway, you kind of get a feel there. So we have Some Kind of Wonderful, and Pretty in Pink, and then Youngblood. And when I say my favorite covers, it's just because by doing this, where they just put the actors in wardrobe, the characters that they were and everything else, for me, when I'm flipping through my soundtracks and looking at that, like, before I could even begin to think about if I want to listen to that album, what songs are on it, just those images take me back to how amazing the movie was, all the emotions from it, the great music from it, everything else. So I love when they do that. So I always consider those my favorite covers when they do. And there's a few more obviously I could have picked out, but when they do that type of thing, it's just freaking awesome. So that's going to be my favorite artwork. Question number 10, a soundtrack that needs a reissue or first time pressing on vinyl. I know I used this for the answer last time, and I will continue to use this as the answer until the day they press it. And it is the soundtrack to the movie Rockstar. They have got to get that on vinyl. That is just an absolute amazing soundtrack. You get everything from just a great hard rock, metal, glam metal type of soundtrack. You get stuff, I don't know, like what kind of stuff is on there? I mean, I think you get like Wild Side from Motley Crue, you get Stranglehold from Ted Nugent, stuff. I think there's also like a Kiss track on there, a few other things. But really the thing that I wanted for is the band that was in the movie was called Steel Dragon. It's all the Steel Dragon tracks from the movie is why I want the soundtrack so bad. So stuff like Blood Pollution, We All Die Young, Stand Up and Shout. I mean, just awesome freaking kind of rock glam metal type of songs. And yes, I want that soundtrack on vinyl so bad. So I'm never going to change my answer to that question until they do it. So that's number 10. Question number 11. A bargain bin soundtrack, something that overall is pretty cheap and readily available, easy to find. I'm going to go with this here, which is Coal Miner's Daughter. Excuse me. Which is basically kind of the story of Loretta Lynn, played by Sissy Spacek. Excuse me. Really, really great soundtrack. And Sissy Spacek, I mean, obviously she was known as being a great actress and Carrie and all kinds of stuff. But she's also a really, really great kind of country singer. And she performed a good chunk of the tracks that are on this soundtrack. She even put out, I think, a couple of studio albums herself. But yeah, really, really great soundtrack. A great tribute to Loretta Lynn. And you can get these typically $5 to $7, something like that. Oftentimes maybe $3 bins you'll find these. So pretty darn cheap soundtrack and a great one. Great movie too. If for some reason you have never seen that movie, A Coal Miner's Daughter, make sure you go check it out. Excuse me. Question number 12. A soundtrack that includes your favorite band or artist. Well, I couldn't think of a soundtrack that had Godsmack in it, so didn't get to do that. But one of the next ones that kind of came to mind, and again, this is the 12-inch single, not the full soundtrack, but Legend of Billie Jean. And of course, Pat Benatar performed the theme, which was the song Invincible. And so Pat is definitely one of my absolute favorite female artists. And as you know, if you guys that have watched me for a long period of time, there's a little phrase you always hear me say, don't sleep on Pat. Because I think way too many people get caught up with only, looking at the 80s hits that she had, which are still awesome songs. But if you dive into her catalog, that's when you start to see, she can rock as hard as anybody. They're the real freaking deal. So I'm going to go with Invincible from Legend of Billie Jean. Let's see, number 13, a track where an actor from the movie also performs a track on the album. Excuse me, I wish I had some water here. I'm sorry, guys. Again, a number of those to pick, but I'm going to go with Black Snake Moan. Again, fantastic movie starring Samuel L. Jackson. And Samuel L. Jackson actually performs, I think, 4 different tracks on this album. Just Like a Bird Without a Feather, Allie Mae, which he does a great cover, the awesome cover of that actually. Stackoli, and then also a track called, which one was it? Oh, the title track, Black Snake Moan, which is a really cool kind of haunting, like the guitar tone. It's like this heavy, bluesy, thick guitar tone with, the rain in the background and everything. It's really kind of creepy, but he did some awesome tracks on this album. So if you're not familiar with it, make sure you check it out. And that's Black Snake Moan. Question number 14, a soundtrack where the band/artist actually performs in the movie. And I decided to go with one of my favorite 80s movies. And again, just seeing the cover makes me smile. Better Off Dead. And one of my, queens of the 80s is E.G. Daily. From an actress perspective to, music and everything else. Matter of fact, I just watched Valley Girl the other day because she stars in that too, and she's just awesome. But she has a song on here called Little Luck, but in the movie she did the title track, which was Better Off Dead. She was performing it as a band at a school dance, and she was the one performing that. So love E.J. Daily, and she performed in that movie. Question number 15. The last movie you watch that you also have the soundtrack to. 3 days ago, I watched this right here, which is Over the Top. I got the urge to put it on and watch the whole thing and just relive great memories again. And again, this kind of shows when I talked about, Miss 80s and I, that being like this with understanding each other. Last year, she sent me some VCLT, and well, anyway, I'll just say that is what she sent me. You know, so if you kind of look on the cover right there, you can see exactly what that is. Or maybe, I guess, that might look a little more, I guess I should face that way, right? So, I mean, yeah, she totally gets me in that regard. But yeah, I watched Over the Top, and fantastic as ever. Just another movie that just never gets old. Um, so question number 16, a record store day soundtrack or score. I actually don't have a single soundtrack that I've got from Record Store Day or that was a Record Store Day um, issue. So I don't have anything for that one. Question number 17, a soundtrack from the year you were born. Same thing. I don't have a soundtrack from the year I was born, so I don't have anything to answer for that one. 18, a soundtrack score or soundtrack slash score blind buy. So the closest thing I think that kind of came to that would be, sorry about the glare again, this right here, which is Return of the Living Dead Part 2. At the time when I bought this back in my early collecting years, I'd seen Return of the Living Dead, of course, and loved the soundtrack to that. And I stumbled across this. I think I was out in Atlanta, and I went to a record store and I stumbled across this. I had not seen Return of the Living Dead 2 at the time, but it was kind of like, I know I'm going to love it. It has to be a given because it's Return of the Living Dead, no matter what part it is. So that was kind of a blind buy there. Question number 19, a soundtrack that you have on multiple formats. Again, a ton of those I could pick out, but the one I decided to pick to represent that question in this thread is going to be the Lost Highway soundtrack. Pretty cool one there. I originally came to this soundtrack years ago for the song I from the Smashing Pumpkins. That was the one song I wanted to get on CD, and I picked it up, and then of course I started to discover the other Bowie stuff and everything from that point moving forward. But yeah, so Lost Highway. And last question, soundtrack that always lifts your mood. What I was going to do actually was just insert right here a video clip of me flipping through my entire 80s section, because pretty much everything in there is a mood lifter for me. And I actually have my soundtracks organized that way. I have just a tab that says soundtracks, and then there's another tab that says why the 80s, you ask? And then it's just all of the 80s soundtracks that I just love to death, and pretty much anything in that section is going to bring my mood up. But if I'm trying to narrow it down, I'm probably going to go with National Lampoon's Vacation as being one that just always lifts my mood up. And really it kind of revolves around two simple factors. Number one, the song Holiday Road by Lindsey Buckingham is just such an upbeat, song that of course you associate with National Lampoon's Vacation. And then two, that song automatically brings about what I call the Chevy Chase shit-eating grin, because nobody does a shit-eating grin the way Chevy Chase does. So it's just, when I hear that song and I think about his face and I just think about the stuff, the movie, the whole nine, you just can't be down. Like that takes you to a happy place every single time. Fantastic stuff. So that's one that never lets me down. So I guess there is a bonus question, is shout out other channels that love soundtracks that should do a response to this. I don't know what other channels are really like hyperly focused on soundtracks. I'm sure most of the channels that I watch, you got JC, Aaron Mutha Alamere, the Zonk Man, guy, Happy Hippie, the vinyl guy. There's a number of channels that I watch all the time that have everything and soundtracks, but I don't know if I can necessarily specifically name someone who I think is really big in the soundtracks. So yeah, if you think you'll have fun just doing this video, period, to me it's an absolute blast. I get to talk about 80s soundtracks, so it's always great. But yeah, so another great tag. Again, VC, as always, let me know what you think, and we will talk to you soon. All right, take care, guys.